So during the break, we had a great question about layers as they pertain to blocks. So if y'all remember, we we placed this piece of 3D line work onto the V-notch weir, I V-notch weir layer, and that line work adopted the properties of that layer, even though it was already white to begin with. It is now part of that layer, and it adopted the properties. If we were to change that layer, those objects to a different layer, for instance, CNO title block, we see that the objects adopt the properties of that layer. And as a reminder, that layer was set to blue and then a line type of -2. Almost all of these are set to continuous, but there are cases where we would want them set to different line types. Okay, so, but if I were to take this block, which is still on the I V-notch weir layer, and just as a refresher, we set the settings for this block through the flat shot command to have green foreground objects and red hidden to background line work. If we were to change the layer of this block object to CNO title block, we'll notice that none of the objects actually changed. The block itself is on the layer that we've set it to. It's on CNO title block, but none of the line work that comprises that block, that are in that block, have changed. This is by default. This is how it should be. And if we were to need to make changes to the layers, colors, or line types of the objects within this block, we would need to edit the block itself. Now, this is all very useful when it comes to using blocks, and I'll show you why. Right now, our current layer is CNO title block, and that is the current layer of this block. The line work I know for this flat shot object is set on the 0 layer. So if I were for any reason to freeze or turn off the 0 layer, well, nothing happened. Beautiful. Okay. But I do want to point out, if we were to edit this block, I'm going to right click, I'm going to select the block and then right click and go to edit block in place. It gives me, this is what we call an anonymously named block. If it ends with a $, that's because it was either inserted from the paste as block command, or it's not an anonymously named block inserted somehow else, like from the flat shot command. While we're going in to edit this, we can select the individual lines that went into making this block and see the properties of those. These were all set to be created on the 0 layer with red as its color or green as its color, depending on whether it was foreground or hidden, and depending on whether it was foreground or hidden, whether it be hidden to or continuous. So if we needed to change the layer data within this block to be able to edit it more freely, we would probably want to create V-notch outer. And I'm going to go ahead and put a hyphen in front of this so it shows up at the top of my list. And we'll change this to green and continuous. And then I'll create another layer called dash V-notch dash hidden. And we'll make its layer properties be red and hidden to. Okay? And now we're still in this block definition. You can see, you know that you're still in a block edit session if you have these 4 buttons up on your ribbon. So now if I select this first line and ask it to select similar, it actually grabbed everything. I'll show you a quick little tool here based on the properties palette. It's called the quick select tool. Because these 2 pieces of line work, even though they're different, they have different settings. They're both on layer 0 and they're both lines. Select similar command ends up grabbing them all. But if we wanted to refine that selection, I could go to quick select and say that I want to select lines based on their color equals green and hit OK. It's just going to select those green lines of that block. And then I can go in here and change it to V-notch outer, and then set it to bilayer. Same thing here. Now that these are the only ones on the 0 layer, if I had select similar, I can get those very easily, and then change those to the V-notch hidden, and again change this to bilayer and bilayer. Okay? And then I can save the changes. Even though we didn't change any geometry, we changed the layer definitions of those objects. And we can put this back on the V-notch weir layer. And I think it should give us some control over whether we show, yeah, we could turn those hidden lines off and make it look more like an isometric view without that hidden line work. Pretty nifty stuff, huh? All right. So that was a great question from Lauren. I appreciate her asking me. Blocks are very useful. There are a whole suite of built-in blocks in our template. You see that, and we have a couple anonymously named blocks. One is that, but we'll find in most of our templates that we have built-in blocks for things like our Schnabel logo. And I'm accessing through these to the insert menu by typing an I and then enter on my keyboard. But all of these SE blocks, which are typically used in paper space, we have a detail call out, a flow arrow. This is a dynamic block which will allow you to change the flow arrow on your sheets when you're showing flow through a pipe or over a spillway. The north arrow scale bar, obviously pretty useful. This has drop downs for both architectural and civil scales or engineering scales, and it scales automatically. Something to note about blocks, and this gets into one of the next topics on our list, and that is scale issues. Okay, and we'll hopefully you'll notice that I'm sort of trying to pepper or season my discussion of each one of these commands and whatnot with standards and national CAD standards and discussions of how we do things and why we do things. So when it comes to scale issues, I'm going to go ahead and insert what's known as an XREF into this drawing. And to get that, I'm going to just go over and hover over this this toolbar here. It's not a toolbar, but this palette here, which is called the XREF Manager. If you can't find it, you can go back to your Home tab, drop down under Palettes, and it's this one with a clipboard with a little clip binder thing on it. And that's your external ref manager. And from here, you can attach drawings, images, DWFs, microstation files, which are .dgn. You can attach PDF underlays. You need to know which sheet number of the PDF you're inserting or wanting to insert. And you can attach all kinds of really cool stuff through here. Here we're in paper space, and I'm going to attach a DWG. Now I'm going to go, I've got an existing project open here. I'm going to go into CAD, Drawings, Base Drawings, Border. And since I'm in paper space, I'm going to insert the title block for this project. All right, now a couple things to note on your XREF attachment here. You have two different options on the reference type. You have attachment and overlay. For the most part, I'd like everybody to be using the overlay option. And what this does is if you have embedded XREFs, in other words, you're inserting an XREF into your drawing that itself has one or more XREFs, those will be ignored in the overlay option. We prefer this use of overlay so that you can have greater control over what shows up and what doesn't show up in your drawings in terms of your XREFs. Embedded XREFs can be a nightmare to edit, and so for those reasons we choose overlay as opposed to attachment. We always go with the defaults, and I'd like y'all to sort of try to remember these defaults. So we go with uniform scale and a scale of 1, 1, 1 on the XYZ. The insertion point for all XREFs should always, always, always be 0, 0, 0, and the angle should also be set to 0. Okay? The rest of this, whether it comes to full path, relative path, and here we're getting a warning about relative path. I'm not going to get into the discussion about relative paths right now, but it can be helpful to use those if CAD will let you. The reason it's not letting me right now is that I haven't saved this drawing, and so it can't physically do a relative path until it's saved. But we'll leave that alone for now and let it do the full path. And so we're inserting this title block into paper space at 0, 0 with a scale of 1 and a rotation of 0. All right? And what we notice is it comes in and it fills in our paper space, which is a default 22 by 34 plan, perfectly. Sometimes you'll notice that when you bring in a title block, it may actually be tiny. In other words, you know that you have your paper space set up to 22 by 34 and everything's ready to go. Maybe this is set up to DWG by PDF, which is here, and ANSI full bleed. Okay. Say you know that you've got a 22 by 34, but this object comes in very, very small, down here in the bottom right-hand corner, only comprising your entire title block. Looks like it's just taking up a little bit of space down here in the right-hand corner, about like this size. That's pretty common for some blocks when you insert them to be out of scale by 12. That's because of units within certain drawings, especially our architectural drawings, are different than units within our civil drawings, and sometimes it'll be out of scale. That's perfectly normal. And I almost wish it would have done it on this example. Let me just start a new drawing and see if I can get it to do that. I'm going to start a new one with the Civil 3D template. Give that a second to load. The reason I bring this up is because I want everyone that uses CAD to be very careful of the scale command. I learned very early on that when you use scale in CAD, you're essentially playing God. I know that sounds overly dramatic, but it's true in a lot of ways. When I talk about, earlier about the importance of what we do, scale and where something lives. It did it perfect. All right, let me delete these notes just to show you exactly what I'm talking about. So we brought in that exact same title block, but into a different template. A template where feet are set as the native units as opposed to unitless or inches. Okay? Our detailed DWG is set up to be unitless, whereas our Civil 3D template is always set to feet. So, because of that units discrepancy, this block came in at exactly 1/12 of its normal size. This paper space is set up to be 22 by 34. If I were to start a polyline command, and instead of placing it in paper space wherever I wanted to, I can actually ask it to go to the origin of the paper space by typing in 0, 0, 0. That is the X, Y, and Z for the origin, and I will draw this nice little polyline over 22 inches. I'm sorry, undo. 34 inches, and then go up 22 inches, back over, again snapping to polar, tracking, back over 34 inches, and then down, I'll just close that polyline. So we know that this paper space, the dark space, is laid out to be 22 by 34. That's right. This is wrong. To fix it, we'll go over here to our Properties menu and see that it's set to scale X1, Y1, and Z1. We're going to change that to 12, 12, and 12. And we get a perfectly oriented title block within our paper space. Again, just like the block and model space, we can edit this in place to make changes to it if we need to, or we can go and open it directly. And what you'll find here, when I go to Open XREF by the right-click menu, we'll see that this object is actually in model space of, it should be a detailed DWG template. You can tell that by its layers list here. Okay? So, I'm going to close that without saving. So this gets us into a discussion about model space versus paper space and where we can talk about scales and a little bit about XREFs and some other things going on. So within the Civil 3D template, I would just move this north arrow into the title block a little bit better. and we'll pop in the model space. This is a brand new clean template. There's nothing in here, but we can pretty quickly bring in data shortcuts and XREFs. We already brought in one XREF for the title block, and we'll bring in some more in just a second. First, I'm going to change something on my tool space, my Civil 3D tool space here, that has to do with data shortcuts. Data shortcuts will be covered more extensively tomorrow, but I'll be glad to introduce them today. They're basically XREFs for civil objects. It's a way for us to keep our drawing file size small by referencing in the surface or alignment or other Civil 3D object as opposed to having a live copy of it within our drawing. So what I did here was set the working folder to the current project, same current project that we're using for the title block, and I asked it to create a reference of a surface named EG, which stands for existing grade, _ main. Okay? When this box comes up, you can see that it's putting it on its proper layer based on our template command settings to put it on its own layer called ctopo-eg _ main. And that can be edited if I wanted to. There's no need to by pressing that button. And it's asking, and it's also telling us what the default style is. It's also based on command settings. And we'll go with we'll change that to 1 in 5 foot existing. Hit OK, hit OK. What happens next is it creates a copy or a reference of that existing grade within our model space in the real world X, Y, and Z of the location of this project. So once it's done referencing in that file, I'll zoom extents by double-clicking on the mouse wheel. You can also type in Z, enter, E, enter to zoom extents. If you were way zoomed in, this is helpful. Z, enter, E, enter to zoom extents. Now we see we've got this existing grade, this really messy existing grade. I think this is an existing dam that failed during a big storm right around the time of Hurricane Matthew. And we see there's a big breach through this embankment here. This is what the surveyor grabbed out there. And this is what we have. And this is a current remediation job that the Greensboro office is working on. So we have this existing grade that lives out in its own world. If we were to, if we're out of curiosity or whatnot, want to find out where the origin is in this drawing, it's almost always going to be to the bottom and left of where our work is taking place. And it's way down there. To give you an idea, we're looking at probably miles and miles, if not hundreds of miles. Yeah, we're looking at 2,075,884 feet away from the origin of the drawing. But that's okay. This is where we want to live. Everything we do in CAD should be, for the most part, especially in civil world, take place in the real world coordinates, either garnered from a surveyor or from some other known location. So we have this existing ground location in model space. If we wanted to go back over to paper space and show or be able to print that existing grade, we would first need to create a viewport. So a paper space and viewports are ways to create a view into our model space world. One of the commands, I think there are multiple, for creating a viewport is called mview. So I'll type that in and then select an area to drop that viewport. Now, double-clicking inside the viewport will activate it and allow you to access the model space objects that are within. Once I'm in here, I can zoom extents again, and we can see the entire length and breadth of that existing grade surface. When working with viewports, there's a couple things I'd like to point out. Right now, it created the viewport based on the mview command on the current layer, which was layer 0. So if I were to print this drawing, we would notice that we actually see the outline of that viewport because of the layer it's on is a plottable layer. So for most cases, for most drawings, for most projects, we would want that viewport on a non-plot layer like def points. And so I selected the object first, and then went up to my layers drop down, and then typed in D to get to the def points layer quickly, and place that object on the def points layer. The button I'm pressing up here is called plot preview. As long as everything is set up properly, in your layout space in terms of Page Setup Manager, that you have it set to a known plotter or plot driver such as Adobe PDF. I tend to like to use DWG to PDF more frequently because it's a more universal BC3 file. We've got the right page size set up and everything else looks good. Load OK and I'll close. Plot Preview and the other button that's up here is called Match Properties. These can be you can add and subtract from this list of quick commands through this little drop down here. Plot Preview is one that I use a lot, so I leave a dock there. So again, if we go to Plot Preview, after turning that viewport to Def Points layer, we'll see that the line that represented the outside of that viewport is now gone. But we can still see the objects through the viewport perfectly fine. Okay? So now we have this existing grade surface from a surveyor. And you know what? But maybe I really don't want to show it at this scale or show the full extent of the site. I really just sort of want to focus on an area that that comprises just the breach area. But maybe I don't necessarily want it oriented as it is true north right now. Well, if I were to change the orientation of this layout, the first step I would want to do is have some sort of reference so I could rotate my north arrow correctly once I get it rotated to how I want. And so how I would do that is through this active viewport. Here I'm in model space now. Anything that I draw right now will be in model space and not in paper space because I have an active viewport and my cursor is within that active viewport. First thing I'll do is change my layer to def point so that this object does not print. And then I'm going to create with a polyline command my own little schematic north arrow. This is for my purposes only. If we were to close back out of the viewport and go back to plot preview, you'll see that that little north arrow schematic is no longer there because it's on a non-plot layer. Okay, so what I want to do next is I'm going to activate this viewport again, and I'm going to use something known as the UCS command. UCS stands for User Coordinate System, and this is what allows us to create rotated views within our viewports through paperspace. And I'll type in the command UCS, enter, and then what I get is this this user coordinate symbol of the X and the Y, and then I can modify that. Now, right now, I'm just going to sort of loosely pick what looks like the center of the top of the old breach embankment, and then I'll come over here and try to figure out what would be a good spot over here to orient myself. But right now, I'm just sort of picking at random and resetting the UCS. And then I'll right-click after picking those 2 points to exit the command. But you should see that my cursor, I hope you can see that, within that viewport you can see my cursor is now rotated based on that UCS. It's a little difficult to see the cursor color there. In fact, I may change the colors. If we go under Options and look at Display and click on Colors, this is why I have that dark background. We can see here that the sheet layout is set to a uniform background with a dark color of 33, 40, 48. That is just so we can see colors like yellow and white a little bit cleaner. When you first open Civil, this may be one of your first changes that you make after setting your support file structure up. But if I go here to crosshairs, I can change its color to white or cyan or green to make it a little bit more clear for you guys at home. Now we've got a green cursor. When I jump into here, it auto-rotates to the current UCS. All right, now that I have this UCS defined, I'm going to type in the plan command, P-L-A-N, and hit enter. And my first option there is current UCS. I'll change that, and you see my cursor is now oriented normally, but everything in my viewport has been rotated. Now it's still in the real world exactly where it belongs. And in fact, if we were to exit out of this and go back into model space, you'll see that it's still oriented exactly how it should be. But within our layout, it's been rotated, which is great. And now that I have that schematic north arrow, I can grab my north arrow, my Schnabel north arrow, and rotate it based on that geometry, and then place it back up here in the corner. So that now I have my object, my model world, model space objects rotated to the orientation that I want to show in this viewport. But then my project manager comes along and reminds me, Yates, we don't orientate our dams going down, on the page like this. All of our dams are shown with flow up the page or in sections of profile views with flow going left to right. I was like, damn it, I knew that. And I'll go back in and reset my UCS so that now my first click is on the right side of the dam and my second click is on the left side of the dam. And I go back and type in my plan command, current UCS, and the entire thing flips again, and I'll have to reset my north arrow. But now we're within the standards of dam engineering, which is to say that flow goes up the page or from left to right, depending on your orientation. So we still don't have something that's worth printing right now. What we have is a viewport that's not at any defined scale at all. And so after I've got it rotated correctly, and I'm sort of zoomed in on the area that I want to look at, I want to go back down here to look at the scale of this viewport. And I want to pick a predefined scale. And we could look at what several looks like. 1 to 10 is going to be really zoomed in on that breach. 1 to 20 is going to zoom out and look at almost the entire site. Maybe I decide that that's exactly what I want to look at, and that looks good. Once you've set your scale and your rotation for your viewport the way you want it, I highly recommend that the next thing you do be to lock the viewport. What this means is that now when I double-click and activate that viewport, I can zoom in and out, and it's not going to change the orientation or the scale of that view at all. The locked viewport means I can zoom in and do some fine detailing in certain areas without messing up my orientation. If for some reason that viewport was not locked and I activated and zoomed in, we'll see that I screw up the everything that I've just worked to create is now kaput. Of course, you could always Control-Z your way back to where you were and then relock your viewport. Okay, so we brought in an object in a model space through our data reference, or data shortcuts menu at the bottom of the tool space. We've got a surface at, at 1 foot and 5 foot existing, and to fill out this picture, we're going to bring in some other objects, both XREFs and data shortcuts. So first, I'm going to bring in an alignment. I've got a centerline of spillway alignment. I'll create a reference for that. We'll be talking a lot about alignments and creating alignments tomorrow, guys. That's one of the first things we're going to be talking about tomorrow is creating alignments for our projects. So I've got 2 different alignments I'm going to bring in as references. The create reference to CL spillway and embankment CL, shortcut for centerline. Just like many of the other objects, when we bring in from data references, it brings up a dialog box which allows us to change styles or change labels and things like that. I'm going to leave all the defaults on for this and bring in those 2. But you'll notice that when we look in here, there are some objects that we can't even see. This is getting back to one of the first things we talked about this morning, and that has to do with annotative scale. But because we already have a viewport set up at a particular scale, 1 to 20, we'll see that those alignment objects automatically rescale because they're automatically annotative. And thank goodness they are not subject to this dastardly button that automatically adds annotative scales to every object. So now we see another thing to note is that the text is automatically readable. If we were to rotate this viewport or rotate the UCS more, we would notice that this text would update automatically as well. If we're to unlock it and change the scale, zoom back into 1 to 10, for instance, and reorient this. As soon as I type in the regen command, regen all, because we've got a locked viewport, we'll notice that those objects reset their size based on our new scale. Okay? So, for instance, let's see here if I can draw this. Turn off O-snaps. What I'm going to draw here is just a quick reference line telling me that's in fact, I know the height of this text is supposed to be 0.1, so I'll start a polyline up here and draw it down 0.1. This is just sort of demonstrating what's happening here with the annotative, automatic annotative scaling. So again, if we jump this back up to 1 to 20, and then regen all, the text got bigger. It's now a little bit more readable, but it's actually the exact same height it was before. That's the intent of annotative objects, is that they maintain, text especially maintains the same height no matter what scale you're showing it at. This allows consistency between our drawings and allows things to be readable at any scale. Did you have a question, Zach? Does anybody else have any questions? Everybody online doing okay? Any questions about this going into annotative scales or viewports and scales? This is sort of the bread and butter of what we do here at Schnabel in terms of creating things in real-world space and model space and the real-world coordinate systems at real-world scales, and then displaying them through paper space at common engineering or architectural scales. Okay, this is, I'm sure, review for 90% of the people here, but it's important to know some of these commands. Let's see, where are we going next? So we talked a bit about scale issues. Let me make one thing 7,000% clear. I said it earlier. When you play with the scale command, you are playing God in CAD. All right. And to demonstrate this, I'm going to bring in an XREF for the same project, the Carver's Creek project. All right. We have a 2D line work existing XREF based on the detailed DWG template. Again, using the overlay and the defaults of scale by 1, an insertion of 0, 0 with a rotation of 0, and we'll bring in that XREF. Okay. You know, all of this line work, everything here, the text even, you know, all of the pipes that were caught in the field, all of this was gathered by a surveyor. And if we were to scale this for any reason at all, we're literally playing God with this drawing. And it is just a recipe for disaster if it's not done carefully. So when we looked at scaling this title block by 12, I just want y'all to remember, if you do have to scale something by 12, never ever use the decimal equivalent of 1/12, because there is no decimal equivalent. You could carry it out forever and ever and ever and never get to the decimal equivalent of 1/12. If this object was scaled to 1, but you wanted it for some reason because of other scale issues to be scaled down by 1/12, please don't ever use 0.08333, even if you carry it out to the 10 millionth decimal point. You can very easily, within the scale X, scale Y, and scale Z properties, use 1/12, 1/12, 1/12. And it will always scale properly versus trying to use the decimal approximate. Okay. So we've touched on scale issues. We've touched on XREFs. And this is the last topic we're going to talk today, and we'll pick back up on data management tomorrow, as well as talk about printing and sheet sets and a bunch of other stuff with Civil 3D tomorrow. Tomorrow is going to be the big day for surfaces, alignments, profiles, profile views, sections, section views, all kinds of really cool stuff. But data management is probably the most important thing we can do with CAD in terms of making everyone's life easier within your work group or within your project team. And it can be fairly daunting at first for a new employee especially, but we have help. We have a lunch and learn document right under CAD natives and commands called data management. Now the data management document goes over every single folder within our CAD directory and what it's used for. So this is a small screenshot. And like I said, I mean, for a new person, this huge list of stuff can be pretty daunting. This document's intended as your help to get along this path and figure out where things go. So every master folder is broken up into subfolders, and each one is covered extensively in this document. And I highly recommend any new employee to have a very good understanding of where to save things. It's a bit much to go over in the short amount of time we have left, but I'll just say that, on one of my first weeks here at Schnabel, I was a contract employee, and I was trying to introduce, some new features to our civil drafting in terms of sheet set managers and things like that. And within about 5 or 10 minutes of setting up our first sheet set on Lake Townsend, I had Greg Paxson and Rob Indry come up to my cubicle and say, "Yates, where the hell are you saving drawings?" And I realized at that point that no one had told me where to save drawings. And so when I had set up the sheet set manager, I had it going to a random folder within our structure, within the project folder. And somebody noticed it, and they came over right away and said, "Why are you saving drawings there, Yates?" And so I looked up and was like, "Where am I supposed to save drawings?" I really didn't know. No document like this existed. Plus, way back then, this would have been 2006 or 2007, there was this extensive level of structure to the CAD folder didn't even exist. But this exists, this level of detail within our CAD folder exists for a reason. And so if you're to go into any CAD folder on any decent sized project, here at Greensboro at least, you'll find a very similar structure to this. So let's see, this is Copsley. Let's go to a more recent project. We'll keep using that Carver's Creek. So under 03 SE products, there's an 08 CAD folder. Your office may be slightly different, but we're trying to create some uniformity across here. So under the 08 CAD folder, we'll have archives, data, drawings, and sheet set. The sheet set should only have the single sheet set for that project. We'll talk a bit more about sheet sets tomorrow when we get into printing, but I'd like to avoid us having multiple sheet sets for a given project for different milestones and things like that, but we'll go into further discussion about that. So almost everything that we have in our drawings is going to be saved in the drawings folder. All your XREFs are going to be saved under base drawings, either base drawings existing or proposed, and border. And then all of your data shortcut drawings, this folder is actually only for XML files. They're automatically generated. You see these are not DWGs, but these are XML files that are automatically generated by the data shortcuts menu when we're creating data shortcuts. But the data shortcut host files are actually saved in base drawings, data reference DWG. And this is where things like surf existing, surf LiDAR, and surf LiDAR all conz, a GIS type file, or GIS originated file are saved and then data referenced from this folder to the data shortcuts XML folder. So that's base drawings, and then we have reports and final drawings or final design. So often with big jobs, your final design folder will have a number of subfolders for designations such as civil or structural or geotechnical drawings or general drawings. Become very familiar with your own office's data management scheme. This is something that a lot of people with the project management improvement group and others have had buy-in on. Get as comfortable as you can with it as quickly as you can, because it makes life a lot easier when somebody asks you about a job 2 years from now. Hey, where do I find that blah, blah, blah? You can, just by nature of sticking with the structure, you can know where to go back to and go look for it. At least get a head start on where you should be looking for it. All right, that's about it for today, guys. We've covered 99% of what I wanted to cover today, and we've got a lot of more things to dive into detail for tomorrow. Our preliminary docket for tomorrow includes datums and projections, use of GIS data, and the use of a lot of our civil objects, including points, alignment, surfaces, profiles, and sections, stuff we've already mentioned. If there are any questions now, either here local or within the Skype group, please chime in now before we sign off for the day. Yes?
References. So you're Do you all keep them in one like original or archive folder, or do you sometimes use extras from other projects? You know,
This is a great question.
Projects or like from the client, and they give you a folder, and you keep it in that folder.
Yeah, so this is a great question about references. If y'all couldn't hear on the phone or through the computer, her question was about references and whether we reuse references from other projects and thus sort of reference them from another project folder or from, say, the archives folder. And this is a great question. The answer is no. We do not reference from the archives folder. We do not reference from other projects. For instance, this, let's see, CAD, I'm back in Carbon Creek. All right, so when we received, one of the first things we'll be doing tomorrow is actually breaking up a survey and going through the process of breaking up a survey. So when we receive a survey, it gets saved as soon as we get it through our inbox or through an FTP site or wherever. Guy brings it to us on a CD, wherever it comes from. It is automatically going to get saved into archives as received and then a dated folder. 2017-02-14, draft site survey allied. All right? That should say 04-14. We have the wrong date on that. Anyhow, so when you get something from outside of the company, whether it's data from an environmental engineering company or surveying data or comments back from an outside reviewer or a senior reviewer, I'd like everybody to get in the habit of saving them to archives as received. And by the same token, everything that leaves your desk from your CAD computer should get saved into archives as sent. And so here we look into archives as sent. I make a pretty good habit of putting everything into dated folders. Before I got involved with this project, somebody had created a number of as sent internal review documents that didn't go into a dated folder. That's okay. I prefer if everything went into a dated folder. But here we see the as sent 2017-04-21. This was the 30% submittal for this project. And just to give you an idea of what it looks like, there's the existing with that nasty breach. There's some of our proposed conditions. No fancy isometric stuff on this one. Sorry, we haven't had time. So this is a pretty standard-looking small design set for a new spillway on a project. Again, this is just 30%, so there's no E&S. There's not a lot of structural detailing and stuff going on, but it is our core concept for this project. The main thing I'd like y'all to remember is that when it comes to referencing, you want to have a copy of whatever it is you're referencing into your drawing saved properly into CAD drawings, base drawings. Typically, it's going to be in one of these 5 folders. Most probably, it's going to be in existing or in proposed. Those are the 2 main folders for XREFs. Now, when it comes to data references, those are handled differently, and we'll touch on that a lot more tomorrow. Does anybody on the horn have any questions? Zach's all good? All right, well, we're going to go and be signing off here and be picking up back here at 9 a.m. tomorrow. I appreciate everybody showing up, and I hope you got something out of this. I know it was a review for most people and going back to the fundamentals for most of y'all, but hopefully there was some nuggets of wisdom in there that y'all can chew on for a little bit. Tomorrow is going to be a lot more in-depth when it comes to Civil 3D and its aspects. Again, I thank you so much, and have a great day. If you think of anything later, feel free to send me an email or give me a call.